You know, historically in Karachi, the absolute final decisions governing the streets, they weren't handed down in courtrooms by judges. No, they were dictated right there in the alleys by whoever was holding the biggest weapons. Welcome to this explainer. Today we're diving deep into the incredibly complex, frankly dark, evolution of Karachi's power dynamics.
So that brings us to the driving mystery we need to unravel together. Who really runs Karachi? To figure that out, we're going to take a chronological journey. We'll trace how absolute power in this massive, sprawling metropolis actually shifted over the decades, moving from violent, blood-stained street corners all the way into completely sterile corporate boardrooms.
Section 1. Origins of the gangs. Let's head back to 1980s Karachi.
Back in the 80s, an early wave of crime completely fractured the metropolis. Basically, the city got carved up into these isolated, heavily controlled territories. You had areas like Malir, Karangi, and Charangi, and each of them had its own local boss. But out of all of them, the most significant was Lyari. This place was once this vibrant, celebrated hub for sports, but tragically, it morphed into the criminal epicenter. And that was largely under a really ruthless figure named Rahman Dakait. I mean, crime was literally in this guy's blood. His family had been smuggling drugs since the 1960s, and according to the sources, he committed his first violent crime when he was just 13 years old. The escalation of that underworld leadership was incredibly swift. By 2001, Rahman Dakait actually formalized his operations. He created the People's Aman Committee, effectively controlling drugs and extortion, all while playing the role of local hero for good PR. But as you can imagine, underworld reigns are super fragile. In August of 2009, Rahman was killed in a police encounter. Well, nature abhors a vacuum, right? Almost immediately, a man named Uzair Baloch stepped right into that void, taking absolute, terrifying control of the area. Now, to really grasp how these massive empires were funded, we have to talk about something called bata. Basically, it's extortion or protection money, strictly demanded from local businesses. Let's look at the story of a man named Faizu Mama. He started out as just a simple timekeeper at a local bus stop and worked his way up to building his very own transport business. But here's the catch. To operate in Karachi back then, he was forced to pay bata. He dutifully handed over 15,000 rupees a month to Rahman Dakait. And of course, as his business grew, the financial demands grew right along with it. It was literally just the forced cost of doing business.
Section 2. The bloody retribution. The fight for extortion.
As Rahman Dakait's influence eventually started to wane, rival gangs completely smelled blood in the water. This led to a massive, violent escalation over those highly lucrative extortion payments we just talked about. A rival gangster named Arshad Pappu decided he wanted his share of the pie. He actually reached out to Faizu Mama and demanded that the extortion money be paid directly to him instead. Faizu Mama refused. And that single refusal literally sparked a war. To make a terrifying example out of him, Arshad Pappu kidnapped and murdered Faizu Mama, and then publicly claimed responsibility for it.
But here is what Arshad Pappu completely failed to account for: Faizu Mama's son. Because his son was Uzair Baloch, the exact same man who would very shortly take over all of Lyari. Driven by this desperate need to avenge his murdered father, Uzair used his immense power and newly acquired wealth to basically bribe the local police. He paid them to capture Arshad Pappu and just hand him straight over. The revenge that followed was absolutely horrifying. Right in the streets of Lyari, Arshad Pappu was publicly executed and beheaded. And in a display of sheer, unimaginable brutality, the gangsters actually played football with his severed head. The message was loud and clear. Uzair Baloch was now the undisputed king.
Section 3, Politics meets the Underworld. A deadly alliance. This is the point where street-level violence terrifyingly merged with formal political power. 200. Over 200. That is the number of severe criminal cases. We're talking kidnappings, burning people alive, brazen daylight murders filed against Uzair Baloch. And yet the guy roamed completely freely. You might be wondering, how is that even possible? Well, it comes down to sheer systemic impunity. According to the source material, Uzair had direct backing from powerful political figures within the PPP. That political support effectively acted as an impenetrable shield against the law. And you have to understand, this corruption wasn't just isolated to one neighborhood. It was a systemic, city-wide issue. While Uzair Baloch, backed by the PPP, ruled over Lyari, the central areas of Karachi were entirely dominated by the MQM, which was led by Altaf Hussain from over in London. The sources detail how the MQM enforced their iron grip through targeted killings and literally forcing votes at gunpoint. So you essentially have this grim reality where politicians, the police, and the gangsters were all sitting at the exact same table, just dividing up the city amongst themselves.
Section 4. The 2013 City Cleanup. The state strikes back.
Eventually, things just hit a breaking point. The extreme crime rates, the daily violence, and this massive, overwhelming public pressure finally forced the state to take sweeping action. They granted full authority to the Rangers to launch what became known as the highly structured Karachi operation. We can break it down into 3 main steps. Step 1, they started right at the bottom, conducting these smaller, targeted raids on street-level killers. Step 2, they widened the net significantly, completely dismantling the Lyari network and actually extraditing Uzair Baloch all the way from Dubai. And step 3, they systematically raided and shut down the MQM's main headquarters, famously known as 90, uncovering these massive caches of illegal weapons on live national television.
Section 5. The new corporate mafia. Suits over guns.
At the time, that 2013 operation was hailed as a massive success, and for good reason. The violence dropped significantly, and some of the most notorious dons were locked behind bars. But here is the chilling truth the sources point out. The state's crackdown didn't actually eradicate the underworld. It just forced it to put on a suit. Think about it. The old mafia was defined by guns, torn clothes, and hanging out on street corners. Today's new mafia? They use pens, legal files, and wear luxury suits. Extortion isn't collected at gunpoint in some dark alleyway anymore. It's seamlessly, quietly collected through bureaucratic files and digital approvals, all from behind sleek corporate desks.
So who exactly are the modern bosses pulling the strings today? Well, they're highly sophisticated syndicates. You've got the water tanker mafia, essentially controlling the city's most essential resource. Then there are the land-grabbing mafias, and these massive real estate players manipulating urban development. Add in colluding media figures who take payouts just to keep their mouths shut. On the surface, these groups appear completely legal. They operate in high-rise offices, not the streets. But beneath that polished veneer, they are running the exact same exploitative system, squeezing everyday citizens just like the dons of the 80s did. It all brings us to a really haunting conclusion about the reality of this metropolis. The source material puts it perfectly. Karachi runs on power pressure, sometimes by gun, sometimes by vote. Sure, the dons might have traded their automatic weapons for leather briefcases, but make no mistake, the underlying machinery of control is still humming right along. And it leaves us with this final, provocative thought. As this massive city continues to modernize and build upward, who are the hidden, sophisticated forces silently pulling the strings of Karachi today? Thanks for tuning into this explainer. I'll see you next time.